Welcome back to the channel, guys. I wanted to get things started off real quick just by talking about the sponsor of today's video, Bespoke Post. Now, if you've never heard of them, you probably ought to check them out because Bespoke Post is a really cool subscription box service that sends cool stuff straight to your door every single month. And it could be anything from kitchenware to outdoor gear, even clothing and knives. And the best part is, by purchasing from Bespoke Post, you're actually helping to support small business because 90% of the stuff that comes in these boxes is from a small company, and many of which are based right here in the United States. Now, the other cool thing is this is not just a random collection of stuff either. This has all been personalized to your specific taste, so you only get what you want. When you sign up, you answer a few simple questions to let them know what you're interested in trying. And before they ship you the box each month, you'll get an email with a preview of what's inside. So you can decide to keep it, swap it for something else, or skip that month entirely for no charge. So after taking the quiz myself, they sent me these 3 boxes, and I'm really excited to open them up and see what's inside because each of them has a value somewhere around $70. But as a member, you only pay a fraction of that price. All right, so the first box that we're opening up is called Tanto, and as its name suggests, we have a knife inside. This one has a fixed blade. It's made from Damascus steel. It also comes with a leather sheath with a little belt clip on there, so you can carry this around with you. And check it out, guys. This sucker is sharp. Box number 2 is called Tooled, and it has inside a nice LED pen flashlight, has a paracord carabiner, and then finally this M250 little hex driver kit. It fits easily in your pocket. It has a magnetic clip on it and has about a dozen different bits, so you can get out of a pinch no matter where you are. So this will be something that'll be handy just to kind of throw in the glove box of your car or truck. And finally, we have box number 3, which is called Switchback. And this is definitely geared more towards the outdoor enthusiast, whether you go hiking or camping, or you just want to keep some survival items in the car. So we've got stuff like a compass, just in case you get lost without a GPS. We have a knife, we have an LED lantern, and of course, my very favorite, we have a fire starter. Well, I gotta say, I think they hit the nail on the head with all 3 of these boxes. My personal favorite is absolutely gotta be Tanto. I've never owned a Damascus steel knife before. This one is sharp, it looks awesome, and it's durable. So by far my favorite, but each and every one of these has some cool and useful things in it. So if you wanna get some gear that's been personalized to your taste, just like all this has been personalized to mine, just click the link down below this video and enter the code TOLMAN20 in the box, all capital letters, as you check out, and you'll get 20% off your first box from Bespoke Post. Well, we're making pretty good progress on the LSA Supercharger installation on the COPO stepside Silverado, and we're just about to the point where we're going to start, buttoning up the last little odds and ends. I've got a lot accomplished on the to-do list. We have the supercharger installed, we have the belt drive ready to go, we have the new throttle body on there, fuel system is done. The wiring is like 99% done. All I've got to do now that we've test fired it is just pull the harness back, wrap everything up with heat, the sleeve and tape and all that good stuff, and put it back together. The heat exchanger system is like 2/3 done. We have the reinforced brick in the lid. We have the oversized heat exchanger mounted up front, but I don't have the pump or the reservoir installed yet, or the wiring that goes to that, although that will be fairly simple compared to some of the wiring changes that we did up there. Some of the small items left, we got to do a throttle cable, build a throttle cable bracket because there aren't many off the shelf that'll work with this throttle body and the fuel rail that we have on here. I know Motion Raceworks sells one, but it won't work with that bolt being occupied there. And they also make one for their throttle body, but once again, they say that won't work with an LSA. So I'm just going to build a simple throttle cable bracket. And of course, there's like a gazillion other little small odds and ends that we have left to finish up before we actually get this truck on the road and tune it. But the tuning, the drivetrain, and the dyno process is kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because of course I want to measure the horsepower gains that we've made at the rear wheels. I'm shooting for somewhere, hopefully, like my blue sky number is somewhere right around 500 at the wheels, which I think would be awesome. We made 275 before, or before, but after our naturally aspirated modifications, camshaft, long tube headers, full exhaust, and basic bolt-ons. So that'll be about a 225 horsepower gain at the rear wheels, and to measure that as accurately as possible, I want to put it on the same, or I think I want to put it on the same dyno that I had before. I want to get to a place where I can actually operate the truck on the dyno myself, but we'll see. So in order to do that, basically, I need to dyno this truck in two-wheel drive. And if you guys have been watching the channel for a while, you know that I'm also in the middle of, or sort of in the middle of doing an all-wheel drive conversion on this truck, and we have some plans for a different transmission and stuff, and that's kind of going to be the meat and potatoes of today's video, is the conversion of the transmission from a 4L60 to a 4L80 while also converting this truck to be all-wheel drive. And I have like 95% of the parts here ready to make that happen. So anyway, I can't dyno the truck in all-wheel drive unless I find a dyno shop that has an all-wheel drive dyno, ideally with a linked roller, where basically there's a belt that goes in between the back roller and the front roller to make sure they always spin at the same speed. And the reason why that is important is because if you dyno an all-wheel drive truck with a viscous coupled transfer case, you potentially could burn it up if there's different loads between the front roller and the rear roller on the dyno. So anyway, that's all to say I'm going to probably dyno it in two-wheel drive before I make the changes that you're about to see. But I have a bunch of parts here and I kind of want to go over them and talk about why we're converting from a 4L60 to a 4L80. So I picked up this transmission last fall when I parted out a Yukon Denali, and the main parts I got were, the transmission, the all-wheel drive transfer case, the front differential, and then of course a bunch of interior stuff that I already threw into the ugly truck. So basically that's got the full Denali interior in it. And my plan for the rest of the drivetrain stuff was going to rebuild it and put it in this stepside here. And originally I was thinking I'd try to stick with the 4L60 based transmission just because there's a few advantages in terms of gearing and things like that. It has a better first gear and a better overdrive, so it'll take off quicker and it will have a lower RPM when we're cruising down the highway. But the trade-off is there's a bigger gear spread between, especially first and second, is a pretty big drop. And then there's the overall strength issue. Like, I know there's a lot of builders out there that claim they can take a 4L60 and make it hold a ton of horsepower and it'll be super reliable and the best thing since sliced bread. But I also know there's a lot of truck owners who buy those transmissions and they have problems with them. Not to say that every transmission builder who claims a strong 4L60 is going to give you problems, but I wanted to try it myself, and I would have to spend a ton of money to go through this thing because you got to upgrade a lot, different hard parts, the shell, there's different shafts and things like that. I already have a decent torque converter in there, but my worry, just kind of at the end of the day, is even if I went through this thing and put all the best parts in there, I don't really know how much abuse it's going to be able to stand up to. So that kind of got my wheels turning and thinking. Of course, the one conversion that everybody does, and which we're ultimately going to be doing, is a 4L80. I've got one in the ugly truck. I rebuilt that one myself, and that truck is putting down 900 pounds of torque at the rear tires. And so far the transmission's holding up good, and it's basically a stock rebuild. Like, it's got new clutches, it's got a shift kit in it, but I didn't put any upgraded like shafts or anything like that inside. I didn't upgrade to like crazy aftermarket clutches. Basically stock parts, and that is doing great. And I think overall I've got about 600 or 700 miles on it since I put it together, and it's 600 or 700 miles of abuse. So basically the 4L80 I think is the obvious choice. I mean, I've had good luck with them. They're fairly easy to work on, and I just picked up one for the step side. So I'm going to show you today all the parts that we got and what it's basically going to take to convert a four-wheel drive Silverado from a 4L60 to a 4L80, or an all-wheel drive one if you have a Silverado SS or a Denali, because there are a few extra parts that you'll need to make that happen. So this is the transmission that we're going to be installing into the stepside Silverado. It is a 4L80, but you'll notice that it's not a junkyard transmission because everything's like nice and shiny and brand new. In fact, this is actually a brand new, completely remanufactured 4L80. Although it is for an earlier model year, this is like for a 94 or a 95 truck. And that is going to present a little, I'm not going to say problem because it's stuff that people can overcome and they do it every day, but that is going to give me just a few things that I have to address before we run it in the truck. But the reason why I chose this particular transmission is, number one, because when I started pricing these things out from junkyards, first of all, I couldn't even find a decent 4L80 within like 150 miles of the house here. And number two, Even if I could, all the junkyards want like $1,000 or $1,200 for like a 180 or 200 or 225,000 mile transmission. So even if I spent that much money, I'd still have to go through it and then put, do the rebuild stuff, do a shift kit and all that other, stuff that people normally do to a transmission. So this is actually, I have a friend who works at or owns a transmission rebuilding shop. So huge thanks to Ed. He got me hooked up with this one. Because it is an older model year, it was sitting on the shelf ready to go. There's not quite as much demand for these, and that means I was able to get it quicker so I can get ready for LS Fest and do all the fun stuff that we're about to do. So anyway, yes, it is an older model year, and there are a few differences we'll go over real quick. The first and major one is that there's no bolt hole up top here for the bell housing. The LSs actually don't use this bolt. The old school small blocks and big blocks use that, but they don't have this one tapped. So because it's an older case, there's no bolt there. But the LSs, they're backwards. They have this bolt, but not that one. So we are going to be down one fastener, but I know people put these in all the time without problems. And also when you consider the fact that we have that big cast aluminum transmission dust cover thing that actually bolts to the oil pan, it's all like a big structural member together. So we just have one fewer bolt basically than this would have had before. Over on this side, the cooler ports are different. The earlier models have the two coolers up front. The later models have a rear feed that lubricates the center support. So internal changes, there's a few different oil passageways to get oil to the back of the transmission. I think the later models are a little bit better when it comes to lube, but these will work just fine. Plus we don't have to redo the cooler lines quite so much. And then over here on this side, there's a few, call them annoying changes. The first one, to bolt the park reverse neutral switch on, we're going to have to drill and tap the bosses that are cast into the transmission, so not a huge deal. I am going to have to install a longer shift shaft to allow the shaft to actually work with the park switch. And then finally, this is like the most annoying one. It's not a big deal at all, but there's normally on the later model 4L80s some bosses that were cast in somewhere up here to work with a shift bracket for the cable. So I actually have on the way now a Sonax bracket that bolts onto the oil pan, so that'll solve all of those problems, and that's what it's going to take to physically bolt in this transmission to the LS truck. So once you've got your 4L80 physically bolted up to your LS engine in your Silverado, there are going to be a few more things that you need just to finish the installation. And some of these are going to be specific to four-wheel drive trucks, and some of this is going to be sort of universal. But the first major thing that you need is a cross member to hold up the rear of the transmission, because the rear mount is in a different spot. You can modify your original one, but it's much easier just to call somebody up and have them take care of it for you. And so this cross member here is actually from Tyler at DTR Fab. And I actually love this design more than any other one I've seen on the market. A lot of people sell these, but his is the only one that I've seen that has these little bosses here, these sleeves. So whenever you bolt this up to the frame, it won't let that little section of the frame collapse as you tighten the bolt. This is like the exact design the factory uses. So that's awesome. And of course, he has all the spacing for all the different trucks. So whether you have a four-wheel drive, a two-wheel drive, or a later model one, he has all the cross members welded up, ready to go. So check him out, DTR Fab. And the other thing, which I actually had on the table right there a second ago, but is now over here, is a dipstick tube. This is from Summit. It's for a 2003 2500 HD. And this is just important because you've got to have the earlier model ones actually, I believe, attached to this bolt, which, remember, on an LS is not used. So you've got to have this specific dipstick to work with that bolt there, or there's the gazillion aftermarket ones too, I suppose. But we've got ourselves a dipstick tube that does reuse, from what I've read, the original dipstick itself. We will be calibrating the level just to make sure that it's full when it says it's full. The next thing we got to talk about is wiring, because we do have to add an input speed sensor so the computer knows how fast the turbine is spinning. This is the kit that I picked up right here. That's the part number. Basically, it's just a plug with a bunch of wiring, and I'll go over this when we actually do the install, but I'll just show you real quick. The 4L80 has 2 speed sensors on it, where the 4L60 only has 1. So input speed, output speed, although on a four-wheel drive, this one is usually not used. This just serves as a plug because they get the output speed from the output of the transfer case there. So that's why a four-wheel drive 4L60, like this one here, actually has no physical input, or rather output speed sensor at all on either side. So That's the wiring taken care of. We'll talk about that guy in just a second. Over here we have an extension housing, or two actually, because I wanted to find an aluminum one. I could not find one of these online until I found one on Amazon. So I'll put the Amazon link for this guy. But I only found that after I bought this older one. This is cast iron. It's heavier, and I believe it, or to me it feels like it's stronger. Not that I've ever seen anybody break one of these, but I'll probably run the iron one just because, hey, why not? It's stronger and it was a little bit less money. I can send that one back. The bell housing cover right here, once again, this is a structural member. You can see all those reinforcement ribs in there. This will help strengthen everything and tie it together. So in my opinion, this is a absolute must. You got to run one of these. I've seen guys leave it out, but those, again, they're hard to find. It's like $200 for that whole kit, which sucks. But what are you going to do? You have to have it on there. So that's like most of the physical parts that we're going to need for the installation. The drive shafts, we will have to probably lengthen the front one, shorten the rear one compared to what we have. Although I do have from my old Suburban, I had the drive shaft from when I had the NP246 in it. It's already been rebuilt with new U-joints. I don't know if that's going to work with this year of truck with the all-wheel drive transfer case, but I do have a front shaft that might work. But worst case scenario, I just got to go down to the local drive shaft guy and have everything lengthened and shortened and balanced, and might as well get them rebuilt at the same time. So finally, all-wheel drive. Let's talk about that because that's like the icing on the cake for this whole COPO truck project. So there's a handful of different all-wheel drive transfer cases that GM used in their vehicles over the years. We have this one here, that's an NV149. This was on like early 2000s Yukon Denali's, the Sierra C3, Silverado SS, and some Escalades. This one uses a viscous coupler to split power between the front and rear. It's like 36% front, 64% rear. In the mid to late 2000s, they used an NP120 in the Trailblazer SS, and then Saab, was it the 97X Aero, whatever, NP120 case that used a torsion style center differential, which from the way I understood it, that's actually more like a Detroit True Track, like a helical gear style limited slip. And I love the True Track, so I would love to have an NP120 case, but they're like way hard to find. And the only other all-wheel drive cases that they made, you know, I'm talking true all-wheel drive, not selectable four-wheel drive. Borg Warner had a handful of different cases that people tend to think they can use because they're, for example, we're going to talk about input shafts here in a second, but the 44, whatever the number is, the all-wheel drive case that they used in the Escalades Denali's with the 6L80 uses an open center differential. And if you know how an open diff works, you know that it's really no good from a high performance standpoint. Like, let's say you're going to do a launch and your left front wheel just starts to spin. It loses traction. Well, in that case, the ABS system would intervene on a factory vehicle. It would apply the brake on the left front, and it would send power to the other remaining three wheels. But like, if you're on a drag strip and you're spinning, the last thing that you want is to start putting the brakes on. That's just going to lead to all kinds of problems. So that's why I wanted to use either the 149 with a viscous coupler or an NP120 with the torsion diff, because they basically work with zero computer intervention, and you know, it's just a simple mechanical device. The problem though is they never put either of those transfer cases on a 4L80 from the factory, where like the transfer case that's in here right now, that's an NP246. Well, they put that transfer case behind 4L60s and 4L80s, so they have a factory input shaft that'll make those two work. But because this never came attached to that, the only input shaft available from GM for an NV149 is a 27 spline, not a 32. But not a big deal, because Modern Muscle Salvage in Michigan, they sell a 32 spline modified input shaft, and I ordered one. It'll be here in a couple weeks probably. And that will allow me to bolt the two of those directly together. And once you have the extension housing on there, this pattern here, that's the same exact as any other GM transfer case. So that'll marry that all together. It'll allow us to have all-wheel drive. We are going to rebuild this case kind of along the same lines, because the truck that it came out of had like 230,000 miles. So we've got a new chain, we've got a new oil pump, new bearings, and I didn't order a viscous coupler because they're like another $700 or $800, and it seems like lately every single thing I do to this truck is another $700 or $800. So we'll see how the viscous coupler works. Sometimes they can fail, and when they do, you just got to replace them. There's no serviceability. It's all welded together as one solid unit. The very last thing I wanted to talk about real quick is the torque converter. That's one more thing I'm waiting on. I am going to get a Circle D 265 millimeter triple disc lockup. I think I'm going with like a 32 or 3400 RPM stall speed. It's basically the same converter I have in the ugly truck, except we have a triple disc. And the reason why I chose that is just because with the 430 gears, I thought, well, if I'm winding the thing out on a drag strip and I need just a little bit more mile per hour before I shift to overdrive, we can just lock the converter clutch under wide open throttle, where with a single disc, you can't really do that. So I did choose the triple disc option, and that'll be here hopefully. I got a lot of stuff to do before LS Fest. That's coming up. Right now it is, let's see, the 15th of March. LS Fest is the 22nd, I believe, of April. So what are we down to, like 5 weeks maybe? I've got a lot to do, and I don't even have the supercharger done yet. The truck's not tuned, so I guess I better quit yapping and I better get back to work. I think what my plan here, guys, is I just wanted to show you all these parts because we are going to be diving into them individually and working on them, but I like to give these overview videos because if someone's thinking about doing a conversion, well, it's just good information to have because they can see all the parts that you're going to need. Drive shafts, that's one more thing, just kind of while I'm thinking about it. I am going to have to lengthen the front shaft and shorten the rear shaft just because, again, the 4L80 is a little bit longer than the 60. So anyway, what I think my plan here is I'm going to take a couple of days off from filming just because that tends to slow things down. And I'm going to start cranking away on my list because I have all these little odds and ends that I have left to do. And individually, none of them really make great video content. But when we are done, I'll probably show you guys an overview of everything that went into just wrapping up the odds and ends list. So I do have to say thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Do me the favor, subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 100,000. That's my next milestone. You guys are awesome. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you again soon.